My wife's family invited me to dinner. They spoke Russian the entire time, laughing. They didn't know I'd lived in Moscow for 8 years. My mother-in-law said, "The fool still thinks the boy is his. The real father visits every month." My father-in-law laughed. "He'll raise someone else's bast at RD forever." I smiled, nodded, poured myself more vodka. Then I looked at my mother-in-law and replied in perfect Russian. Her glass shattered on the floor. Before we begin, please subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now, let's begin. The elementary school parking lot gleamed with fresh rain as Grant Griffith watched his son emerge from the building. Ethan clutched a drawing in his small fists, his dark hair, so unlike Grant's sandy brown, catching the afternoon light. The boy's eyes, deep brown where Grant's were hazel, scanned the crowd of parents before landing on his father. "Dad!" Ethan ran forward, and Grant caught him, lifting him despite the growing weight of a 6-year-old. "What V you got there, champ?" "Family tree project. I drew you super tall." Ethan's grin showed a missing front tooth. Grant studied the crayon figures. Himself tower-like. Nina, his wife, with yellow hair carefully colored. And Ethan between them, holding both their hands. Something twisted in Grant's chest, a feeling he'd been pushing down for months. "It's perfect, buddy." The drive home took them through the north side of Portland, past the cafes and bookstores Grant had loved when they first moved here. 7 years ago, fresh from a decade abroad, he'd thought he'd found peace. Moscow, Prague, Kiev, those years working as an energy consultant had left him fluent in Russian and cynical about human nature. Then he'd met Nina Calderon at a friend's gallery opening, and her laugh had made him believe in starting over. Now, watching Ethan babble about recess in the rearview mirror, Grant wondered when the doubt had started. When had he first noticed that Ethan looked nothing like him? When had Nina's late nights at yoga class begun to feel like a pattern? When had her family's barely concealed contempt evolved from irritating to suspicious? Their house, a renovated Craftsman in Laurelhurst, felt empty when they entered. Nina wouldn't be home for hours. Grant made Ethan a snack and settled him with homework before retreating to his study. He pulled out his laptop and stared at the file folder he'd created 3 weeks ago. A folder he'd told himself was paranoia. A folder titled Questions. Inside, screenshots of text messages Nina had deleted but that he'd recovered from cloud backups. Receipts for hotel rooms. A credit card statement showing regular charges to a steakhouse across town, always on the 3rd Tuesday of each month. The same Tuesday Nina claimed to have evening yoga. Grant's finger hovered over a photograph he'd taken last Tuesday. He'd followed her, hating himself for it, and captured her entering the restaurant. With her was a man Grant recognized, Roland Robbins, a real estate developer whose face appeared in the business section regularly. Tall, dark-haired, with the same deep-set eyes as Ethan. His phone buzzed. Nina's text lit up the screen. "Having dinner at my parents' tonight. They invited you. 7 p.m. Please come. It's important." Grant stared at the message. In 7 years of marriage, the Calderons had never issued a warm invitation. Marlene Calderon, Nina's mother, had the warmth of a Siberian winter. Victor, her father, treated Grant like a servant who'd exceeded his station. Their home in the West Hills reeked of old money and older grudges. "Important," Grant muttered. He texted back, "We'll be there." He spent the afternoon, as he always did, present for Ethan, his mind running calculations. At 6:30, he dressed carefully, slacks, buttoned down, the watch Nina's parents had given him for their wedding. The watch was a Poljot, Russian-made, cheap. A joke he'd understood even then. The drive to the Calderon house took 40 minutes. Ethan chattered about his day, while Grant followed the winding roads into the hills. The house emerged from behind tall hedges, a modern monstrosity of glass and steel, all sharp angles and cold surfaces. Marlene opened the door. She was 63, but carried herself like visiting royalty. Her platinum hair was pulled back severely, and her smile never reached her eyes. "Grant, Ethan, Dorogoy." She swept the boy into her arms, cooing in Russian. Grant caught fragments. "My precious, how you've grown." Inside, The house smelled of cooking and expensive perfume. Victor stood by the bar, pouring vodka into crystal glasses. He was a barrel-chested man with silver hair and hands that had never seen labor. "Grant," Victor said, his accent thick despite 40 years in America. "Come, drink." They gathered in the dining room, where Nina was setting the table. She kissed Grant's cheek, her perfume unfamiliar. New, expensive. She wore a dress he'd never seen. "You look nice," he said. "Thank you." Her eyes didn't meet his. Dinner began with the usual performance. Marlene brought out pelmeni, borscht, blini with caviar. The good crystal came out. The good vodka. Victor made a toast in Russian about family and loyalty, words that dripped with irony. Grant smiled and nodded, playing the part he'd played for 7 years. Then came the shift. Marlene and Victor began speaking to each other in rapid Russian, their voices casual, comfortable. Nina joined in occasionally, laughing at jokes Grant wasn't meant to understand. Ethan played with his food, used to being excluded. Grant had learned, early in his marriage, that the Calderons knew he didn't speak Russian. Nina had asked him once, in their first month together, if he'd ever traveled abroad. He'd mentioned Europe, kept it vague. She'd never pressed. Why would she? She'd found what she wanted, a well-employed American with no connections to her parents' world, no way to penetrate their secrets. Marlene refilled her wine glass and said something that made Victor chuckle. Grant caught every word. Durak das ini saspravetsia. The fool doesn't even suspect. His hand tightened on his fork. Nina laughed, adding her own comment. He thinks everything is perfect. It's almost sad. Victor leaned back, gesturing with his vodka. And then came the words that changed everything. Durak vse yesh dumiyet, kto malchik yego. Nastoyevchi otets prizhayet kazdi meziats. The fool still thinks the boy is his. The real father visits every month. Marlene nearly choked on her laughter. On budet vaspitavat chud zogo viradka vekno. He'll raise someone else's bastard forever. The room swam for a moment. Grant's vision tunneled, then cleared. Every instinct screamed at him to react, to flip the table, to demand answers. Instead, years of training in conference rooms and floor negotiations kicked in. He smiled, nodded, reached for the vodka bottle, and poured himself another measure. His hand was steady. Victor said something else, but Grant didn't hear it over the roaring in his ears. Ethan. His son, no, not his son. The boy he'd raised, loved, protected. The boy he'd rocked through nightmares and taught to ride a bike. That boy was Roland Robin's child, and everyone at this table knew it. Everyone but him. Grant raised his glass. Marlene was still laughing, her eyes cruel. Victor grinned like a wolf. Nina looked down at her plate, but her smile remained. Za Semu, Grant said in perfect Russian. To family. The toast hung in the air. Marlene's glass slipped from her fingers and shattered against the hardwood floor. Red wine spread across the white oak like blood. Victor's face went slack. Nina's head snapped up, her mouth opening in shock. Grant took a sip of his vodka, maintaining eye contact with Marlene. He let the silence stretch, watching her face cycle through disbelief, fear, and calculation. You? Marlene started in English, then stopped. I lived in Moscow for 8 years, Grant said, still in Russian, his accent flawless. I worked out of the embassy district. I negotiated energy contracts with Gazprom executives. I spent my weekends at the Bolshoi and my weeknights in Arbat bars learning every curse word, every idiom, every subtle insult. He switched to English, his voice conversational. I understood every word of every conversation you've had in front of me for 7 years. Nina's face had gone white. Grant, every family dinner, every holiday, every comment about how I wasn't good enough, how I was too American, too simple. I heard all of it. He set his glass down gently. I just didn't realize until tonight that you'd been discussing my son's paternity over Zakuski and vodka. It's not, Nina began. Roland Robbins, Grant said. 3rd Tuesday of every month. The Heathman restaurant. You've been using the same credit card for 2 years, Nina. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Victor found his voice. You have no proof. I have bank statements, hotel receipts, photos, Text messages you thought you deleted. Grant stood, his movements controlled. I have a very good lawyer on retainer, Lawrence Kern, if you know the name. Former federal prosecutor. He's been helping me document everything for the past month. The lie came easily. Lawrence was an old friend from his Moscow days, now practicing law in Portland, but Grant hadn't told him anything. Not yet. But the Calderons didn't know that. Marlene had recovered her composure. If you think you'll get custody of a child who isn't mine? Grant smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We'll see what a DNA test says, which we'll be doing, legally, properly, through the courts. He looked at Ethan, who had gone very still, not understanding the Russian, but sensing the tension. The boy's eyes were wide, frightened. Grant felt something crack in his chest. Ethan, buddy, go wait in the car. Take my keys. He handed them over, and the boy fled, grateful for escape. When the door closed, Grant turned back to his wife and her parents. You have 48 hours to tell me everything. Who knows about this? How long it's been going on? Every detail. If you lie, if you hide anything, I will dedicate every resource I have to destroying all three of you. You can't threaten us, Victor blustered. That wasn't a threat. It's a timeline. Grant headed for the door, then paused. And Victor? That pole jot you gave me for our wedding? It's worth about $60. I knew that when you gave it to me. I wore it anyway because I loved your daughter. He let that sink in. I won't make that mistake again. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and Grant walked to his car. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, clutching his family tree drawing. Grant slid behind the wheel and sat for a moment, his hands on the steering wheel. Are you and Mom fighting? Ethan's voice was small. Yeah, buddy. We are. Is it my fault? Grant looked at the boy, the child he'd raised, biology be damned, and felt rage crystallize into something cold and purposeful. No, Ethan. It's not your fault. None of this is your fault. He started the engine. Let's go home. As they drove away from the glass house on the hill, Grant's mind was already working. 48 hours wasn't really a deadline for the Calderons to confess. It was a deadline for him to prepare. Because Grant Griffith hadn't survived a decade in Moscow by being naive. He'd survived by being patient, thorough, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. The Calderons thought they'd been playing him for 7 years. They had no idea the game had just begun. The next morning, Grant took Ethan to school and drove directly to Lawrence Kern's office in downtown Portland. Lawrence practiced out of a converted warehouse in the Pearl District, all exposed brick and polished concrete. He looked up when Grant entered, his graying beard and wire-rimmed glasses giving him the appearance of a professor rather than a lawyer. Grant, this is unexpected. Lawrence gestured to a chair. What's wrong? You look like hell. I need to hire you. Officially. Client-attorney privilege, the whole thing. Lawrence's expression sharpened. Tell me. Grant laid it out. The discovery, the dinner, the revelation. Lawrence listened without interrupting, his fingers steepled. When Grant finished, Lawrence let out a low whistle. Jesus, Grant. I'm sorry. I don't want sympathy. I want strategy. Divorce is straightforward enough, even with the infidelity. Oregon's a no-fault state, but this kind of behavior helps with asset division and potentially with custody. I don't want divorce proceedings. Not yet. Lawrence frowned. What do you want? Grant leaned forward. I want to know everything. I want to understand the full scope of what they've done, who knew, how deep this goes. Then I want to make sure they lose everything that matters to them. That sounds like revenge, not legal strategy. Can it be both? Lawrence studied him for a long moment. What did you do in Moscow, Grant? You never really told me. Energy consulting, contract negotiations, some work with the embassy on commercial relations. And Grant smiled thinly. And I learned that the most effective way to destroy someone isn't loudly. It's quietly, systematically, by removing the supports they don't even realize they're standing on. Lawrence sat back. I'll help you with the legal aspects. Documentation, custody arrangements, asset protection. But Grant, I need you to promise me you won't do anything illegal. I promise I won't get caught doing anything illegal. That's not the same thing. It's the best you're getting. Lawrence sighed and pulled out a legal pad. Fine. Let's start with what we know and what we need to find out. They spent 2 hours building a framework. Lawrence would file for a legal separation, citing irreconcilable differences. Simultaneously, they'd request a paternity test for Ethan. Grant would move out, establish his own residence. Standard, predictable. What about the Calderons? Lawrence asked. Victor and Marlene. That's where it gets interesting. Grant pulled out his phone and showed Lawrence a photo. Victor Calderon came to the U.S. in 1984, claiming political asylum. Built a fortune in import-export, primarily medical equipment and pharmaceuticals. Legitimate business? That's what I need to find out. The timing is interesting. 1984, late Soviet era, KGB still running active measures. A lot of people who came over then had connections they didn't advertise. You think Victor was an intelligence asset? I think it's worth checking. I have contacts in Moscow who might remember the name. Lawrence rubbed his forehead. Grant, if you start poking around in Cold War espionage. I'm not poking. I'm just asking old friends to look at public records. Grant's smile was cold. Everything I'm planning is either legal or untraceable. I learned from the best negotiators in Russia, the ones who could smile at you over vodka and quietly arrange for your business to collapse the next week. This is a bad idea. Do you have a better one? Lawrence didn't answer. They worked through lunch, building the foundation of Grant's legal protection. By 3 p.m., Grant had a separation agreement drafted, a forensic accountant on retainer, and a private investigator named Don Pay scheduled to start surveillance on Nina and Roland Robbins. The PI is expensive, Lawrence warned. This whole thing is going to cost you. I have money set aside. Grant had been careful with his earnings from Moscow, investing in index funds and real estate. The money was in accounts Nina didn't know about, deliberately kept separate. Whatever it costs, it's worth it. He left Lawrence's office as the city descended into afternoon rain. Portland in November was gray, wet, and cold. Perfect weather for the mood settling over Grant's life. He drove aimlessly for a while, thinking through the next steps. His phone rang. Nina's number. What? We need to talk. Her voice was strained. I believe I gave you 48 hours. It's been 16. Grant, please. I can explain. Can you explain which month Roland started visiting? Can you explain when you decided to pass his child off as mine? Can you explain why your parents thought it was funny? Silence. 48 hours, Grant repeated and hung up. He drove to a coffee shop in southeast Portland, ordered something strong, and opened his laptop. His contacts list contained dozens of names from his Moscow years. Energy executives, embassy staff, journalists, fixers. People who knew how to find information in places where information was currency. He typed an email to Dmitry Volkov, an old friend who now worked for a think tank in D.C. Dmitry, hope you're well. I need a favor. Looking for background on a Victor Calderon, emigrated 1984 from Soviet Union, claimed political asylum. Originally from Leningrad/St. Petersburg. Any records, any connections, anything interesting. Quiet inquiries only. We'll explain when we talk. Grant. He sent similar messages to 3 other contacts, each with slightly different angles. One would check business records. One would check immigration databases. One would ask around in the expat communities in Moscow and St. Petersburg. By the time he picked up Ethan from school, he'd set a dozen wheels in motion. How was your day, buddy? Grant asked as Ethan buckled in. Okay, I got a gold star in math. The boy paused. Mom texted you a lot. Your phone kept buzzing. I know. Are you getting divorced? Grant pulled into traffic. 6 years old and already asking the hard questions. I don't know yet, Ethan. Maybe. Because you were fighting? Because sometimes grown-ups realize they made mistakes. Did you make a mistake? Grant glanced in the rearview mirror. Ethan's dark eyes, Roland's eyes, stared back at him. Yeah, I trusted people I shouldn't have. Oh. Ethan looked down at his backpack. My friend Tyler's parents are divorced. He sees his dad on weekends. It's not so bad, he says. The casual way Ethan accepted it broke something in Grant's heart. If that happens, you'll see me more than weekends. I promise. They stopped for pizza, avoiding the house as long as possible. When they finally returned at 7, Nina's car was in the driveway. Grant steeled himself. She was in the kitchen, pouring wine with shaking hands. When Grant entered, her eyes were red. Ethan, go to your room, Grant said. But, now please. The boy fled upstairs. Nina started to speak, but Grant held up a hand. Did you tell them? Tell who what? Did you tell your parents that I know? That I speak Russian? That I heard everything? Nina nodded miserably. What did they say? They're angry. They want to talk to you. They think we can work this out. Work what out exactly? Grant's voice was level, controlled. Work out the part where you've been sleeping with Roland Robbins? Work out the part where Ethan isn't my son? Work out the 7 years of lies. It's not that simple. Then explain it. Simply. Nina collapsed into a chair. I met Roland before I met you. We dated for a year. It was intense, but it fell apart. Then I met you at Vanessa's gallery opening, and you were so different. Stable, kind, present. We got married fast, and I thought I'd moved on. But you hadn't. Roland came back into my life when I was pregnant. He showed up at my office, wanting to reconnect. We met for coffee. Just coffee at first. When did coffee turn into hotels? She flinched. After Ethan was born, I was overwhelmed. You were working long hours, and Roland was there. He said he still loved me. One thing led to another. How long have you known Ethan is his? The question hung between them. Nina's face crumpled. I've always known. The timeline. I knew it was possible from the start. Then when Ethan started looking like Roland, I knew for sure. Grant absorbed this. 7 years. She'd known from the beginning. Your parents knew? I told my mother when I was pregnant. I was panicking, and she said it didn't matter. That you'd be a good father, that Roland wouldn't want the responsibility. She told me to keep it quiet, to make it work with you. And your father? He found out later. He thought it was funny. The American husband, raising a Russian man's child. Nina wiped her eyes. Grant, I'm sorry. I know I should have told you. I know I shouldn't have let it continue. But I didn't know how to stop. You could have told me the truth. You would have left. Yes, I would have. Nina looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. But now? Can we fix this? Can we try therapy or... No. Grant, please. You've had 7 years to tell me the truth. 7 years to decide that our marriage mattered more than your affair. You chose differently every single day. He stood. I'm moving out. Lawrence Kern is handling the separation. You'll be served papers next week. What about Ethan? We're going to do a paternity test. Legally. Then we'll figure out custody based on what's best for him, not what's convenient for you. My parents will fight you. Let them try. Grant climbed the stairs to Ethan's room. The boy was supposed to be doing homework, but was clearly listening at the door. Grant pretended not to notice. Hey, buddy. I need to tell you something. Ethan's lower lip trembled. You're leaving. Yeah. Your mom and I need some space. But I'll see you all the time, okay? This doesn't change how much I love you. Okay. Ethan whispered. Grant pulled him into a hug, feeling the boy's small body shake with silent sobs. Whatever happened with the paternity test, whatever legal battles came next, this child had done nothing wrong. Grant would protect him from the fallout if it was the last thing he did. He packed a bag, took one last look at the house he'd thought was his future, and drove to a corporate apartment he'd rented that afternoon. The space was sterile, impersonal, but it was his. He poured a drink, sat in the dark, and waited for his contacts to respond. Around midnight, his phone buzzed. An email from Dmitri. Grant, interesting name you sent me. Victor Calderon, born Viktor Mihailovich Kuznetsov, Leningrad, 1952. KGB file exists, but is mostly redacted. Emigrated 1984 under unusual circumstances. Most asylum seekers went through Helsinki or Vienna. He came through Mexico. Business interests flagged by FBI in early 90s, but no charges filed. We'll dig deeper. What's this about? D. Grant read the email 3 times. Viktor Kuznetsov. KGB file. Unusual emigration route. The pieces were starting to come together, but the picture wasn't clear yet. He typed a response. Personal matter. Keep digging. Especially interested in any business connections, any ongoing relationships with Russian entities, anything that might be legally questionable. Money is no object. Gee. As he hit send, Grant felt the familiar rush of a negotiation beginning. The Calderons thought they held all the cards, the grandparents, the wife, the family structure. They thought Grant was just the fool who'd been tricked. They were about to learn what happened when you underestimated someone who'd spent 8 years navigating the most cutthroat business environment in the world. Grant Griffith hadn't just lived in Moscow. He'd thrived there, and he was about to bring those skills home. 3 days after the revelation, Grant sat in a nondescript office building in Beaverton, across from Don Pace, the private investigator Lawrence had recommended. Don was 50-something, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent years in law enforcement before going private. "How about the basics on Roland Robbins?" Don said, spreading photos across the desk. "He's cleaner than I expected. No criminal record, no obvious vices. Successful developer, multiple properties across the city. Married 15 years ago, divorced 8 years ago. No kids from that marriage. Does he know about Ethan? Hard to say for certain, but based on the surveillance? Yeah, he knows. Look at this." Don pulled up a photo on his tablet. Roland Robbins standing outside an elementary school, watching children on the playground. "That's Lincoln Elementary, 2 weeks ago. Ethan's school." Grant's jaw tightened. "He's watching my son. Allegedly his son, according to your wife. But he's not approaching, not making contact. Just watching. 3 times in the past month. What else?" Don flipped through his notes. "Monthly meetings with Nina, just like you said. Always the Heathman. They're not subtle. They arrive separately but leave together. Sometimes they go to a condo he owns in the Pearl District. I've got photos, timestamps, everything you need for a divorce proceeding. I need more than divorce ammunition. I need leverage." Don raised an eyebrow. "What kind of leverage?" "The kind that makes him disappear from Nina's life permanently." "Where are his pressure points?" "Financially, he's solid. The divorce didn't hurt him much. No debt, no obvious cash flow problems. Reputation-wise, he's involved in a couple of big development projects that require city approval. One's a mixed-use tower in the Lloyd District, the other's a renovation of the historic Bancroft building downtown. City approval means politics." "Exactly. He's been courting city council members, attending fundraisers. If there was a scandal, say, a married developer having an affair with a married woman, it might make some of his political friends nervous." Grant considered this. "What about the ex-wife? Sylvia Robbins. Remarried, living in Seattle. The divorce was allegedly amicable, but I can dig deeper if you want." "Do that. Also, I want to know everywhere Roland goes, everyone he meets with for the next 2 weeks. If he so much as jaywalks, I want documentation." Don nodded slowly. "This is going to cost you." "I'm aware." After the meeting with Don, Grant drove to his new apartment and found an email waiting from his Moscow contacts. Dmitry had come through with a preliminary report. "Grant, your man is fascinating. Viktor Kuznetsov worked in the Leningrad KGB's second chief directorate in the late 70s, domestic counterintelligence. Low level, nothing glamorous. But in 1983 to 84, something happened. His file shows a sudden transfer, then emigration almost immediately. Very unusual. I have a source in St. Petersburg who remembers the name. Says there was a scandal involving black market medical supplies. Kuznetsov was accused of stealing from military hospitals and selling on the black market. He emigrated before charges were filed. His asylum claim in the U.S. was based on political persecution, but it looks more like he was running from criminal charges. His business in the U.S., medical equipment import, is probably the same racket, just legal this time. Want me to keep digging? D. Grant leaned back, processing. Victor had been a thief, a black marketeer. He'd built his American fortune on the same criminal instincts he'd used in the Soviet Union. And Marlene? Grant sent another email to Dmitry. What about Marlene? Wife came over with him. Maiden name probably Sokolova or something similar. Interested in her background too. Gee. While he waited for responses, Grant opened his laptop and started researching Victor's business. Calderon Medical Supply Incorporated operated warehouses in Portland and Seattle, importing equipment primarily from Eastern Europe. Nothing illegal on the surface, but Grant knew how these operations worked. The margins on legitimate medical supplies were thin. Victor's wealth suggested he was doing more than just importing hospital beds. Grant spent hours digging through public records, SEC filings, import manifests. Victor's company had contracts with several hospital networks, but also with smaller, private clinics. Some of the clinics have been flagged by state health boards for various violations. Nothing major, nothing prosecuted, but a pattern of corner cutting. His phone buzzed. Lawrence Kern. The paternity test is scheduled for next Friday, Lawrence said without preamble. Court ordered. Nina's lawyer tried to fight it, but the judge agreed it's relevant to custody. Good. Grant, there's something else. Nina's lawyer is Christopher Greer. Do you know that name? Grant thought. Real estate lawyer, right? Handles commercial transactions. Exactly. He's not a family law attorney. The Calderons specifically hired him, which suggests they're worried about their business exposure in the divorce. They think you're going to go after Victor's company. Smart of them. Are you going to go after Victor's company? Only if I find something worth going after. Lawrence sighed. I can't help you if I don't know what you're planning. Then maybe you shouldn't know. After hanging up, Grant poured himself a drink and stood at the window, watching rain streak the glass. Below, Portland hummed with evening traffic. Somewhere out there, Nina was putting Ethan to bed in a house that used to be Grant's. Somewhere, Roland Robbins was probably reviewing blueprints for his next development, oblivious to the net closing around him. Somewhere, Victor and Marlene Calderon were scheming, confident that their secret was still safe. They didn't understand yet that Grant wasn't interested in a quick divorce or a simple revenge. He was interested in total collapse. The kind of collapse that took years to build and moments to execute. His phone buzzed again. Another email from Dmitry. Marlene is even better. Born Marlene Pavlovna Volkova, daughter of a mid-level party official in Leningrad. She worked as a translator at the Finland consulate before marrying Kuznetsov. Her father was arrested in 1983 for taking bribes, about the same time Victor emigrated. My source thinks Marlene's family connections are what got Victor out of the USSR before prosecution. She pulled strings, called in favors. They've been partners in every sense since then. Her role in Calderon Medical is officially just vice president, but she's the one who handles all the Eastern European contacts. I'm betting she's the real brains of the operation. Grant smiled. Marlene, the ice queen, the woman who'd mocked him in Russian for 7 years. She was the key. Victor was the muscle, the front man, but Marlene was the operator. He began drafting a plan, working late into the night. By 3 a.m., he had the outline. Phase 1, document everything. Nina's affair, the Calderons' mockery, the paternity issue. Build an airtight legal case. Phase 2, investigate Calderon Medical. Find the illegal activity he knew had to exist. Phase 3, identify Roland Robbins' vulnerabilities and pressure points. Phase 4, execute. Systematically destroy each pillar of their lives until they had nothing left. It was ambitious. It was ruthless. It was exactly what they deserved. Grant saved the document, encrypted it, and went to bed. For the first time in months, he slept soundly. The next week unfolded like a carefully choreographed operation. Grant maintained his routine, seeing Ethan every other day, working his consulting job remotely, appearing cooperative with the separation process. Beneath the surface, he was gathering ammunition. Don Pace's surveillance on Roland Robbins paid off on Tuesday. Roland met with a city council member, Brian Beasley, at a steakhouse. Don managed to get audio. The Bancroft renovation is a go, pending final approval. Roland's voice came through clearly. I appreciate your support on the zoning variance. You've been generous with your campaign contributions, Beasley replied. Just keep it subtle. The ethics board's watching these days. Grant listened to the recording 3 times. A quid pro quo between a developer and a city council member wasn't illegal per se, but it was definitely gray area. If it became public, especially in an election year, both men would have problems. On Thursday, Dmitry sent a bombshell. Grant, I found it. Calderon Medical has been importing pharmaceutical equipment from a Ukrainian company that's flagged by the FDA. The equipment is used to manufacture generic drugs, but the safety standards are questionable. No enforcement action yet, but there have been complaints. More interesting, the Ukrainian company is owned by a shell corporation in Cyprus, which traces back to a Russian oligarch named Alexei Morozov. Morozov is sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department as of 2022. If Victor is doing business with a sanctioned entity, even indirectly, that's a major violation. The fines could be millions. Prison time is possible. D. Grant read the email twice, his heart racing. Sanctions violations. The Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control didn't mess around. If he could prove Victor's company was doing business with Morozov shell companies, even unknowingly, it would trigger a federal investigation. He forwarded the email to Lawrence with a simple note. Is this actionable? Lawrence called within 10 minutes. Where did you get this information? A contact in D.C. Former colleague. Grant, if this is accurate, we're talking about federal crimes. You need to be very careful how you proceed. If you tip off Victor before the authorities are involved, he could destroy evidence. So what do I do? Let me make some calls. I know someone in the U.S. Attorney's Office. If there's enough to warrant an investigation, they'll handle it. How long will that take? Weeks, maybe months. Federal investigations move slowly. Grant gritted his teeth. Months was too long. He needed Victor neutralized now, before the old man could regroup and come after Grant's custody of Ethan. Do it, Grant said. But I'm not waiting for the feds to move. I'm going to accelerate things. Grant, trust me. He hung up before Lawrence could argue further. Then he composed an email to Dmitri. I need this confirmed with documentation. Import records, invoices, anything that proves the connection between Calderon Medical and Morozov's companies. Can you get that? Gee. The response came an hour later. Working on it. Give me 48 hours. D. Friday arrived with the paternity test. Grant and Nina met at the clinic in cold silence, with Ethan between them, confused but cooperative. The swab took seconds. Results would take a week. In the parking lot, Nina tried to talk to him. Grant, can we please discuss how to handle this? For Ethan's sake, there's nothing to discuss until the results come back. You know what they'll say. Then you should have told me 7 years ago. She looked broken, standing there in the rain. Part of Grant wanted to feel sympathy. The larger part remembered her laughing at the dinner table while her parents called him a fool. My parents want to meet with you, Nina said. They think we can come to an arrangement. An arrangement. Financial. They'll help with Ethan's expenses, make sure you're taken care of in the divorce. But they want this kept quiet. No public scandal. Grant almost laughed. Victor and Marlene thought they could buy him off. They still didn't understand who they were dealing with. Tell your parents I'll meet with them, Grant said. Sunday afternoon. Their place. But I'm bringing my lawyer. Nina looked relieved. Thank you. I'll tell them. Grant drove away, already planning. Sunday's meeting wasn't about negotiating. It was about watching them lie, documenting their attempts at cover-up. Every conversation now was evidence. That evening, Don Pace called with more news. I dug into Roland's ex-wife like you asked. Sylvia Robbins isn't as happy as she pretends. I talked to her sister. They're estranged from Roland because of the divorce settlement. Apparently, Roland hid assets during the divorce, and Sylvia got a lot less than she deserved. She's been quietly bitter about it for years. Would she be willing to talk to me? I think so. She's remarried to a guy named Fred Buchanan, lives in Seattle. I can set up a meeting if you want. Do it. This week if possible. Sunday's meeting with the Calderons approached like a storm. Grant prepared meticulously, briefing Lawrence on every detail. They arrived at the Glass House at 2 p.m., greeted by Victor's forced hospitality. Grant, Lawrence, please come in. We have much to discuss. The living room had been staged for negotiation, coffee, pastries, legal pads. Marlene sat in an armchair like a throne, her expression neutral. A third person stood by the window, Christopher Greer, their attorney, tall and silver-haired. Shall we begin? Greer said, taking control immediately. My clients are prepared to offer a generous settlement. In exchange for your agreement to a quiet, amicable divorce and shared custody of Ethan, they're willing to provide $500,000 in immediate payment, plus a trust fund for Ethan's education. Grant glanced at Lawrence, who remained expressionless. That's a substantial offer, Lawrence said carefully. What are the conditions? Greer slid a document across the table. Standard confidentiality agreements. Grant agrees not to discuss the circumstances of the divorce publicly, not to pursue any legal action against the Calderon family or their business interests, and to agree to a custody arrangement that includes significant time for Nina and the grandparents. Grant pretended to read the document. It was more than generous. It was desperate. Victor and Marlene were terrified of what he might do. I noticed there's no mention of Roland Robbins in this agreement, Grant said mildly. The room tensed. Mr. Robbins is not a party to these proceedings, Greer said. But he's the father of the child we're discussing custody for. Shouldn't he be involved? Victor's face darkened. Robbins is not family. Neither am I, apparently. Grant set the document down. Here's my counteroffer. Nina files for divorce, admits to the affair, and agrees to primary custody for me. Victor and Marlene stay out of my life completely. No contact with Ethan except on my terms. And Roland Robbins signs away any parental rights he thinks he has. Marlene's composure cracked. You cannot dictate. I can and I am. Otherwise, this gets very public. Affairs, lies, mockery in Russian over family dinners. How do you think your business associates will react when they learn you've been laughing at your son-in-law for 7 years while covering up your daughter's infidelity? You have no proof, Victor blustered. Grant pulled out his phone and played an audio recording, one he'd made secretly at a family dinner months ago. Marlene's voice came through clearly, making a cruel joke in Russian about Grant's ignorance. Victor's laughter followed. I have dozens of these, Grant said. Timestamp documented. I may have been silent, but I was never stupid. Greer held up a hand. Let's all calm down. Grant, you're understandably angry, but this approach benefits no one. The child. Ethan, Grant interrupted. His name is Ethan, and he's the only person I'm concerned about protecting. Lawrence leaned forward. My client is willing to revisit settlement terms after the paternity test results are confirmed. Until then, all offers are premature. The meeting dissolved into tense argument. The Calderons tried threats. They'd fight for custody. They'd tie him up in court for years. Grant remained calm, unmoved. Finally, Victor played his trump card. You think you can threaten us? I have resources you cannot imagine. Connections. Friends in places you'll never reach. Grant smiled. Like your friends in Ukraine? The ones who supply your medical equipment through sanctioned Russian oligarchs. The color drained from Victor's face. Marlene actually stood up, her hands trembling. You're bluffing, she said in Russian. Am I? Grant responded in the same language. Alexei Morozov, Cyprus Shell Corporations, Ukrainian manufacturing plants. Should I continue in English, or would you prefer I keep this between us? Victor grabbed Greer's arm and pulled him into a whispered conference. Marlene stared at Grant with something approaching respect and fury mixed together. You have been investigating us, she said, still in Russian. You spent 7 years mocking me in a language you thought I didn't understand. Did you think I would just accept it? What do you want? I told you. Stay away from Ethan. Stay away from me. And I want every detail of your business dealings with Morozov's companies. Every invoice, every shipment, every payment. That information would destroy us. Yes, it would. Marlene switched back to English. Victor, we need to speak privately. The Calderons and Greer huddled in the corner. Grant caught fragments, threats, panic, calculation. After 10 minutes, they returned. We need time to consider your proposal, Greer said diplomatically. You have until Wednesday, Grant said. After that, I'm making phone calls to the Treasury Department. He and Lawrence left, and Grant didn't speak until they were in the car. That was risky, Lawrence said. You showed your hand. I showed them enough to make them panic. Now, they'll make mistakes. What if they lawyer up and stonewall? They won't. Victor's been running criminal operations for 40 years. He's arrogant, but he's not stupid. He knows sanctions violations mean federal prison. He'll try to make a deal. Lawrence shook his head. You're playing a dangerous game. I learned from dangerous people. That night, Grant received an encrypted email from Dmitri with attachments, dozens of invoices, import records, and shipping manifests linking Calderon Medical to Morozov's network. It was everything he needed. He forwarded it all to Lawrence with instructions to prepare a package for the U.S. Attorney's Office. Then he sat back and waited for Victor to break. The call came Monday morning. We will give you what you want, Victor said without preamble. Nina will file for divorce. We will not contest custody. But you must promise never to contact the federal authorities about our business. That's not how this works. Then we have no deal. You don't understand. I'm not negotiating. The information has already been sent to the U.S. attorney. What happens next depends entirely on how cooperative you are with them. The line went silent. Then Victor said something in Russian that would have made a sailor blush. I will destroy you, he finished in English. You tried that already. You failed. Grant hung up, feeling no satisfaction. This wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about protecting Ethan from a family of liars and criminals. If Victor went to prison, so be it. If Marlene's business collapsed, that was justice. But there was still one piece missing: Roland Robbins. The meeting with Sylvia Buchanan took place in a coffee shop in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. She was an attractive woman in her early 40s, with auburn hair and cautious eyes. Grant had driven up alone, leaving Lawrence out of this particular conversation. Mr. Griffith? She extended her hand. I wasn't sure you'd actually come. Thank you for meeting me. I know this is unusual. They settled into a corner booth. Sylvia ordered tea. Grant got coffee. Don Pace said you wanted to talk about Roland, she began. What's your interest in my ex-husband? Grant decided on honesty. He's been having an affair with my wife. I recently learned that my son might actually be his son. I'm trying to understand what kind of man I'm dealing with. Sylvia's expression hardened. Roland is charming, successful, and utterly selfish. That's all you need to know. I need more than that. She studied him for a long moment, then sighed. What do you want to know? Why did your marriage end? The official story is irreconcilable differences. The truth is I caught him with another woman. Not the first time, but the last time I was willing to tolerate. I filed for divorce, but Roland had been planning for it. He'd moved assets, hidden accounts. By the time my lawyer figured it out, it was too late. I got a fraction of what I deserved. Do you have proof of the hidden assets? Some. Not enough to reopen the case, according to my lawyer. Why? Grant leaned forward. Because I'm building a case against him, and if he defrauded you in the divorce, that's a crime. It might not be too late to pursue. What do you want from me? Everything you have. Documents, bank statements, emails, anything that proves he hid money from the court. Sylvia considered this. If I help you, what do I get? If I can prove fraud, you can file a motion to reopen the divorce settlement. You might get what you're owed. And Roland's reputation as an upstanding developer goes up in flames. A slow smile spread across her face. Where do I sign? They spent 2 hours going through her documentation. Sylvia had been thorough. She had copies of bank statements showing suspicious transfers, emails where Roland discussed moving money, even testimony from an accountant who'd helped him hide assets. It was circumstantial, but combined with Don Pace's current surveillance, it painted a picture of a man who thought he was above the law. There's one more thing, Sylvia said as they prepared to leave. Roland always wanted kids. It's part of why our marriage failed. I didn't want them, he did. If your son really is his, he won't walk away easily. He'll fight for custody. Let him try. You don't understand. Roland doesn't lose. He'll use every resource, every connection. He's relentless. Grant met her eyes. So am I. Back in Portland, Grant compiled everything into a comprehensive dossier. Nina's affair, Victor's sanctions violations, Roland's divorce fraud. 3 targets, 3 separate vulnerabilities. The question was how to orchestrate their simultaneous destruction. That evening, Lawrence called with news. The paternity test results are back. Grant's heart hammered. And you're not Ethan's biological father. The DNA match probability is 0%. Grant closed his eyes. He'd known, logically, but hearing it confirmed felt like a punch to the gut. There's more, Lawrence continued. Nina's lawyer petitioned for an immediate custody modification, citing the paternity results. They want primary custody for Nina, with you getting supervised visitation. On what grounds? They're claiming you have no legal standing as a non-biological parent. That's bullshit. I've raised Ethan since birth. Oregon law recognizes psychological parentage. I know, and we'll fight it. But Grant, they're going to make this ugly. Greer filed a motion to intervene on behalf of the biological father. Roland's claiming paternity? Officially, yes. He wants joint custody with Nina. Grant felt rage crystallize into cold clarity. Roland wanted to swoop in, claim the child he'd helped create through deceit, and play father. Victor and Marlene wanted to control the narrative. Nina wanted to avoid consequences. They were all about to learn that Grant Griffith didn't just negotiate. He won. Set up a court hearing, Grant said. I want this resolved quickly. And Lawrence? Give me a meeting with the U.S. attorney handling the Calderon investigation. It's time to make a deal. The next 72 hours were a blur of preparation. Grant met with Assistant U.S. Attorney Edmund Waters, a serious man in his 50s who reviewed Dimitri's evidence with growing interest. This is substantial, Waters said. If we can verify these connections, Calderon Medical is looking at serious fines and potential criminal charges for the principals. I can provide testimony about the family's history, their connections to Russia, everything, Grant offered. Why are you doing this? Revenge. Protection. These people have been defrauding the government while mocking the country that gave them asylum. They deserve to face justice. Waters nodded slowly. We'll need time to build a case. Months, probably. I can give you something to accelerate the timeline. Grant handed over another document. Financial records showing Victor has been paying bribes to Russian officials to facilitate imports. That's Foreign Corrupt Practices Act territory. Waters' eyebrows rose. Where did you get this? Sources in Moscow. All legal, all verifiable. Mr. Griffith, you've been busy. I had good motivation. The custody hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. Grant spent the weekend with Ethan, not telling the boy about the test results, just being present. They went to the zoo, played video games, ate pizza. Normal things. Things a father and son did. Sunday night, Ethan asked, "Are you really not my dad?" Grant's breath caught. "Who told you that?" "I heard Mom on the phone. She said the test came back wrong." Grant knelt down to eye level. "Ethan, listen to me. Biology doesn't determine family. I've been your dad since the day you were born. I taught you to ride a bike. I read you bedtime stories. I've been there for every scraped knee and bad dream. That doesn't change because of some test. But Roland is my real dad. Biologically, yes. But that doesn't mean he gets to just show up and take you away from me. I don't want to go with him. I don't even know him. Then we'll fight to make sure you don't have to." Monday's hearing was tense. The courtroom was small, Judge Margie Sprague presiding. She was known for being fair but tough. Christopher Greer represented the Calderons and Nina. A new lawyer, Alan McIntyre, represented Roland Robbins. Lawrence sat beside Grant. Nina testified first, crying as she explained how the affair had started, how she'd been confused and overwhelmed. She painted herself as the victim, Roland as the persistent pursuer. It was a performance. Roland testified next, claiming he'd only recently learned about Ethan's existence, that he wanted to be a father, that he had resources to provide for the child. He conveniently omitted the monthly hotel visits. Then came Grant's turn. "Mr. Griffith," Judge Sprague began, "you've been informed you're not Ethan's biological father. What's your position on custody?" "Your Honor, I've been Ethan's father in every meaningful way for 6 years. I provided for him, cared for him, loved him. The paternity test doesn't change that relationship. Oregon recognizes the doctrine of psychological parentage. But Mr. Robbins is claiming his biological rights," the judge interrupted. "And the law generally favors biological parents. The law also considers the best interests of the child. Ethan doesn't know Mr. Robbins. Transferring custody to a stranger would be traumatic." Roland's lawyer jumped in. "My client is prepared to establish a relationship gradually, with appropriate transition. Your client has been stalking my son's school," Grant said coldly. He nodded to Lawrence, who presented Don Pace's surveillance photos. "He's been watching Ethan from a distance for months. If he truly wanted a relationship, he could have come forward honestly. Instead, he's been conducting an affair with my wife while secretly observing the child they created." The judge studied the photos. "Mr. McIntyre, is this accurate?" Roland's lawyer fumbled. "My client was merely ensuring the child was well cared for by watching him from a car." Judge Sprague's voice was sharp. "That's concerning behavior." The hearing continued for 2 more hours. Grant presented character witnesses, documentation of his involvement in Ethan's life, school records showing him listed as the primary parent contact. Roland presented financial statements and vague promises about future involvement. Finally, Judge Sprague called a recess to consider. In the hallway, Victor and Marlene cornered Grant. "You think you're winning," Victor hissed. "But you've made powerful enemies. Enemies who are about to be indicted for federal crimes," Grant replied calmly. "How's your lawyer bill looking these days, Victor? I hear defending against Treasury Department investigations gets expensive." Marlene's eyes flashed. "We will take Ethan from you." "No, you won't. Because the judge sees what you are, manipulative criminals who use family as a weapon. And when your trial starts, your parental rights will be the least of your concerns." When the judge returned, her expression was unreadable. "This is an unusual situation," she began. "We have a biological father claiming rights, a psychological father who has raised the child, and a mother caught between them. However, the evidence is clear that Mr. Griffith has been the primary caregiver and that the child has a strong bond with him. Mr. Robbins' recent interest, while legally valid, doesn't outweigh 6 years of parenting." Roland started to object, but the judge held up a hand. "Therefore, I'm granting primary custody to Grant Griffith, with visitation rights for Nina Griffith pending completion of her divorce proceedings. Mr. Robbins will be granted supervised visitation, starting with 2 hours per week, to establish a relationship with the child. This arrangement will be reviewed in 6 months." The courtroom erupted. Roland's face went purple with rage. Nina collapsed in tears. Victor shouted something in Russian about corrupt American judges. Grant felt Lawrence's hand on his shoulder. "You won." "First round," Grant corrected. "There's still work to do." Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered. Someone had tipped them off. Grant made a brief statement about protecting his son's interests, then left before they could ask about the Calderons' legal troubles. That evening, as Grant and Ethan ate dinner in the new apartment, his phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Griffith? This is Edmund Waters. We've fast-tracked the Calderon investigation based on your evidence. We're executing search warrants on Calderon Medical tomorrow morning. I thought you want to know." Grant smiled. "Thank you for the update. There's one more thing. Victor Calderon tried to flee the country this afternoon. He was stopped at the airport. We flagged his passport." "Good." After hanging up, Grant looked at Ethan, who was doing homework at the kitchen table. "Dad," the boy asked, "are things going to be okay now?" "Yeah, buddy. I think they are." But Grant knew better. The Calderons were cornered, which made them dangerous. Roland was humiliated, which made him vengeful. And Nina was desperate, which made her unpredictable. The war wasn't over. It was just entering its final phase. The federal raid on Calderon Medical made the front page of the Oregonian. Agents and windbreakers carried boxes of documents out of the company's warehouse while news helicopters circled overhead. Victor and Marlene were photographed being escorted out in handcuffs. Not arrested yet, but detained for questioning. Grant watched the coverage from his office, feeling a grim satisfaction. Years of criminal enterprise ended in a single morning. Lawrence called. "Have you seen the news?" "Watching it now." Victor's lawyer is already making noise about entrapment, about vengeful ex-family members. He's going to claim you manufactured evidence. Let him claim it. Everything Dimitri found is documented and verifiable. The U.S. attorney wouldn't have moved without solid proof. There's another problem. Nina called me. She's threatening to fight the custody arrangement, claiming you're using the investigation to prejudice the judge against her family. She can try. The custody order is based on Ethan's best interests, not his grandparents' criminal activity. But Grant knew Nina was right to be worried. With her parents facing federal charges, her own position was weakening. And Roland, humiliated by the custody ruling, would be looking for ways to reassert control. Don Pace called with an update on Roland. "Your developer friend is getting desperate. He met with Brian Beasley again yesterday, the city council member. They were arguing. I got audio." Don played the recording. Roland's voice was strained. "You need to accelerate approval on the Bancroft project. I'm facing financial pressure." Beasley sounded nervous. "I can't just ram through approval. The ethics investigation into our relationship is heating up. Someone leaked our previous conversations. Then handle it. Roland, you need to back off. This is getting too hot. Grant smiled. Someone had leaked their conversations, that someone being Grant himself, through an anonymous tip to the city ethics board. Roland's political connections were unraveling. There's more, Don said. Roland's been liquidating assets. He sold his condo in the Pearl District and 2 investment properties. He's raising cash fast. For legal fees? Or to run. The divorce fraud evidence is making its way to the prosecutor's office. Sylvia Buchanan's lawyer filed a motion to reopen her divorce case. Everything was converging. The Calderons facing federal charges, Roland facing fraud investigations, Nina facing divorce and custody loss. All 3 pillars of the conspiracy against Grant were crumbling. But Grant couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Cornered animals were dangerous, and he'd cornered 3 of them. The call came on Thursday. Nina's voice was tight with panic. Grant, we need to talk. In person. It's about Ethan. What about him? Not on the phone. Please. Coffee tomorrow morning. They met at a neutral cafe in Selwood. Nina looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, weight loss, trembling hands. My parents are going to prison, she said without preamble. The lawyers say it's just a matter of time. The sanctions violations alone carry mandatory minimums. They should have thought about that before doing business with sanctioned oligarchs. Grant, please. I know you hate me, but they're still Ethan's grandparents. He'll grow up knowing his grandfather is a felon. He'll grow up knowing his grandfather made choices and face consequences. That's called justice. Nina's composure cracked. You destroyed my entire family. Was it worth it? Your family destroyed themselves. I just documented it. What about Roland? What about him? He's threatening to take Ethan and run. He's desperate, Grant. He's saying if he can't have custody legally, he'll take it illegally. Grant's blood ran cold. Is that a threat? It's a warning. Roland doesn't accept loss. And with everything collapsing around him, he's not thinking clearly. If he touches my son, he'll regret it. He's not afraid of you. He's not afraid of anything anymore. He's already lost his political connections. His reputation is in ruins, and the fraud investigation is going to bankrupt him. What's stopping him from just disappearing with Ethan? Grant stood. Tell Roland that if he comes near Ethan, I'll have him arrested. And tell him I have evidence of more than just divorce fraud. I have evidence of tax evasion, bribery, and conspiracy. He wants to play hardball? I'll bury him. Nina grabbed his arm. Grant, wait. What if I help you? What if I testify against Roland in exchange for, I don't know, supervised visitation with Ethan? Why would you turn on him? Because I'm scared. Because my parents are going to prison and I need to protect myself. Because maybe if I cooperate, the prosecutors will go easier on me. Grant studied her. Nina was a survivor, always had been. She'd survived her parents' criminality by pretending ignorance. She'd survived her affair by lying. Now she was surviving again by betraying her co-conspirators. What do you have on Roland? Everything. Emails, recordings, financial documents. He trusted me with access to his accounts. He thought I was too stupid to understand what I was seeing. But you weren't. I grew up watching my parents run scams. I know how it works. Grant made a decision. Bring everything to Lawrence's office tomorrow. If it's useful, we'll talk about visitation. That night, Grant increased security at his apartment building and installed cameras. He briefed Ethan's school on the situation, providing photos of Roland and instructions to call police if he appeared. Don Pace began 24/7 surveillance on Roland's movements. The weekend passed tensely. Nina delivered her evidence, a treasure trove of incriminating documents showing Roland's tax evasion, his bribery of city officials, his hidden assets. Lawrence forwarded it all to the appropriate authorities. Monday morning, Roland Robbins was arrested at his office. The charges, fraud, tax evasion, and bribery. His bail was set at $500,000, which he posted immediately, but his passport was seized. Grant watched the arrest on the news and felt no triumph, only relief. One more threat neutralized. But that afternoon, his phone rang. Ethan's school. Mr. Griffith? We have a situation. A man claiming to be Ethan's father tried to pick him up from school. We refused and called the police, but we thought you should know. Grant's heart hammered. Is Ethan safe? He's in the principal's office with a security guard. The police are here. I'm on my way. Grant broke every speed limit getting to the school. Police cars filled the parking lot. Inside, he found Ethan crying in the principal's office while officers took statements. "Dad!" Ethan ran to him, and Grant scooped him up. "It's okay, buddy. I've got you." A police officer approached. "Mr. Griffith? I'm Officer Terry Bradshaw. We detained Roland Robbins attempting to take your son from school. He claimed he had custody rights. He doesn't. There's a court order. We're aware. Mr. Robbins violated the order and his bail conditions. He's being taken back into custody. We're adding attempted kidnapping charges." Grant felt Ethan shaking in his arms. "Is he gone?" "Yes, sir. He won't be getting bail this time." As the police led Roland away in handcuffs, the developer's eyes found Grant's. The look was pure hatred. Roland shouted something unintelligible before being shoved into a patrol car. Grant took Ethan home, ordered pizza, and spent the evening just holding his son. "I was scared," Ethan admitted. "I know, but you did everything right. You stayed with your teacher. You didn't go with the stranger. I'm proud of you." "Is he really my dad?" "Biologically, yes, but that doesn't make him family. Family is people who love you and protect you, not people who try to take you away." Ethan was quiet for a long time. Then, "You're my real dad." Grant's eyes burned. "Yeah, buddy, I am." The next day brought more news. Victor and Marlene Calderon accepted a plea deal. 10 years in federal prison for Victor, 5 for Marlene, in exchange for cooperation and asset forfeiture. Calderon Medical would be dissolved, its assets used to pay fines and restitution. Roland Robbins, facing kidnapping charges on top of everything else, had no leverage left. His lawyer negotiated a deal where he pled guilty to fraud and attempted kidnapping, receiving 8 years in prison. In exchange, he permanently surrendered all parental rights to Ethan. Nina, who had cooperated with prosecutors, received probation and a hefty fine. She agreed to supervise visitation with Ethan 2 hours per week, pending successful completion of therapy. The divorce was finalized on a gray December morning. Grant stood in the courthouse and felt nothing. No sadness, no relief, just numbness. 7 years of his life, over. But he had Ethan. That was what mattered. Lawrence met him for coffee afterward. "You did it," the lawyer said. "Custody, justice for the Calderons, Roland behind bars. Congratulations. It doesn't feel like winning." "What does it feel like?" "Like I burned down a forest to kill a snake." Lawrence considered this. "Maybe, but the snake was poisonous and the forest was rotting from the inside. Sometimes destruction is necessary." Grant thought about Victor's arrogance, Marlene's cruelty, Roland's entitlement, Nina's lies. They'd built their lives on deception and exploitation. They'd mocked him, used him, and tried to steal his son. "Maybe you're right," Grant said. Spring came to Portland with cherry blossoms and rain. Grant settled into a routine with Ethan, school drop-offs, soccer practice, weekend hikes. The boy was thriving, his nightmares fading, his smile returning. Nina's supervised visits continued, awkward but peaceful. She was trying, Grant could see that. Try to rebuild some kind of relationship with the son she'd lied about. Whether she'd succeed was up to Ethan. Grant's consulting work picked up. Clients who'd heard about his investigation skills started requesting his services. He turned most of them down, but took a few interesting cases. Nothing criminal, just business intelligence work that utilized his Russian contacts and Moscow experience. Dmitry emailed regularly, updating Grant on the fallout from the Calderon case. The investigation had uncovered a whole network of medical supply companies running similar scams. Grant's evidence had triggered a cascade of federal prosecutions. One Saturday, in April, Grant took Ethan to the zoo. They stood by the Russian bear exhibit, Ethan's favorite, watching the massive animals lumber around their enclosure. "They look mean," Ethan said. "They're not mean, just powerful. And they remember things. Bears have long memories." "Like you." Grant laughed. "Maybe a little." As they walked back to the car, Ethan took his hand. "Dad, I'm glad you're my dad." "Me too, buddy. Me too." That evening, after Ethan was in bed, Grant sat on his balcony with a glass of vodka. He thought about the dinner at the Calderons' house, about Marlene's glass shattering on the floor when he'd spoken Russian. That moment had changed everything. His phone buzzed. An email from Edmund Waters, the U.S. attorney. Grant, thought you'd want to know? Victor Calderon's cooperation led to arrests of 3 Russian oligarchs connected to the sanctions violations. You helped break open a major case. The Treasury Department is grateful, even if they can't say so officially. If you're ever interested in consulting work with the government, let me know. We could use people with your skills. Edmund. Grant deleted the email. He'd had enough of investigations and revenge. He dismantled the people who'd wronged him, protected his son, and ensured justice was served. That was enough. But as he looked out over the city lights, Grant couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The fool they'd mocked over dinner had destroyed their empire using nothing but patience, intelligence, and the very language they'd thought kept their secrets safe. Marlene had been right about one thing. Grant had long memories. And in the end, that had made all the difference. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.